U.S. increases military aid to Guyana as Venezuela threatens war over oil. Tensions are reaching a boiling point between Guyana and Venezuela as a long-standing territorial dispute over the oil-rich Essequibo region escalates. With Venezuela flexing its military muscle and the U.S. stepping in to support Guyana, is this conflict on the verge of war? Let's break it all down. For decades, the Essequibo dispute has remained a diplomatic challenge, but recent developments have pushed it into a potential military confrontation. Venezuela's claim to the region, driven by nationalistic sentiments and economic desperation, has gained new momentum following recent discoveries of vast oil reserves. Meanwhile, Guyana, a smaller nation with a growing oil economy, finds itself backed by major international allies, including the United States, as tensions rise. This episode is not just about land, it's about power, resources, and strategic interests. As the world watches closely, the geopolitical chessboard is being rearranged. With Venezuela's military movements and the U.S.'s increased involvement, the next few weeks could determine whether this dispute remains a diplomatic standoff or escalates into something much worse. The Essequibo region is a massive 159,500 square kilometers area administered by Guyana, but claimed by Venezuela for over a century. The dispute dates back to colonial-era agreements and an 1899 arbitration ruling, which Venezuela rejected decades later. While the region had remained a contested but relatively stable area, ExxonMobil's 2015 discovery of large oil reserves in Guyanese waters reignited tensions, bringing new economic and political stakes into the equation. Venezuela, struggling with internal crises, sees Essequibo as a potential economic lifeline, rich in both resources and opportunities for expansion. The December 2023 referendum organized by the Maduro government claimed overwhelming support for annexing Essequibo, a move that alarmed Guyana and its allies. While Guyana has turned to international courts to solidify its sovereignty, Venezuela's recent rhetoric and actions suggest that the dispute is far from being settled diplomatically. On February 29, 2025, a Venezuelan Coast Guard vessel entered Guyanese waters near an ExxonMobil oil facility, triggering a strong reaction from Guyana's government. This incident follows a pattern of increased Venezuelan military presence near the disputed border, with reports of unauthorized overflights and naval patrols. Guyana's president, Irfan Ali, condemned the incursion as an act of intimidation, while diplomatic protests were swiftly lodged against Venezuela. Just weeks earlier, on February 15th, a group of suspected Venezuelan militants attacked a Guyanese military patrol along the Cuyuni River, injuring 6 soldiers. The attack further escalated tensions, as Guyana accused Venezuela of orchestrating proxy attacks in disputed areas. While Venezuela has officially denied involvement, these incidents highlight a growing pattern of aggression that has fueled concerns about a possible military escalation. In response to these developments, the United States has stepped up its military assistance to Guyana, supplying surveillance drones, helicopters, and advanced radar technology. This move is seen as part of Washington's broader strategy to counter Venezuela's influence in the region while protecting its own economic interests tied to ExxonMobil's investments in Guyanese waters. The Pentagon has also initiated discussions about expanding training programs for Guyana's defense forces to improve their readiness in case of further hostilities. Beyond material support, the U.S. has also increased its diplomatic engagement, with top officials warning Venezuela against any aggressive actions. This development underscores the growing international dimension of the conflict, where Guyana is not just defending its borders, but also becoming a key player in a wider geopolitical struggle. For Venezuela, the U.S. involvement adds another layer of complexity, potentially deterring military action but also fueling anti-American narratives at home. Could this dispute lead to an all-out war? While full-scale conflict remains unlikely, the risk of localized military skirmishes is increasing. Guyana, historically a peaceful nation, now finds itself in a position where it must prepare for the worst while still pushing for diplomatic solutions. The involvement of the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, and regional organizations like Caricom will be crucial in preventing an escalation. The role of neighboring Brazil also cannot be ignored, as it shares a border with both Guyana and Venezuela and has interests in maintaining regional stability. If Venezuela takes further military steps, Brazil may be forced to take a stance, further internationalizing the crisis. Meanwhile, the US's continued support for Guyana could push Venezuela closer to alliances with Russia and China, adding a Cold War-style dimension to the dispute. With Venezuela pushing forward and the US increasing its military backing, Guyana finds itself at the center of an international power struggle. The situation is evolving rapidly, and the coming weeks will be critical. Is war inevitable, or can diplomacy still prevent disaster? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. The Essequibo crisis is more than just a regional dispute. It's a test of international diplomacy, military strategy, and economic ambition. As global powers take sides, Guyana must navigate one of its most challenging moments in history. The question remains, will reason prevail, or is the region on the verge of a crisis that could spiral out of control?